Hello, how's everybody doing? How's everybody been? Hopefully good. Hopefully everybody's been applying themselves and doing some good, disciplined actions with strictness involved and a little bit of flavor. So, so yeah. Excuse me. So basically, I'm just gonna make this video, right? Just because of the last time I actually made one, I really didn't touch in depth on what I was actually trying to talk about. I was basically just talking about, what you actually have inherited because you are Christians, and this is probably one of the least, talked about parts of a sermon. They always talk about grace and other things that more or less just it applies to baby Christians in all honesty, but I mean, for the individual that's been there for a while, I mean, I guess they just get content with those type of messages without any real direction or real growth or maturity. I understand, like, to an extent, the real world matures us, but you also need to be having to understand and come to a level of understanding on why you're even here to begin with, what your whole point of you actually being a Christian is. Excuse me. And what Christ himself actually wants from you while you're walking here on earth. So, first things first, this is just a formative period for heaven, and that's it. Honestly, there's so much more to life, what they actually try to make it seem to be, but in reality, that's all it realistically is. Once you focus on that, and you focus on your legacy through your children, and you pass this on to your children, and your children pass this on to their children, and it just goes on and on and on, then obviously that family tree is being preserved, and they're not walking in complete darkness concerning these things, as most of these pastors and preachers and shepherds are obviously walking in complete darkness, just given the fact that they obviously don't preach about this period being the only formative time for heaven, and that's essentially it. And then you die, and then obviously, because you are actually practicing these things out, and obviously just common sense things where you just begin practicing the scriptures out and the commandments of Christ, as well as really coming to a maturity and a depth of you actually being able to recognize that there just is no alternative to any of Christ's commandments or any of his ways. So I mean, that would essentially be it. Sounds depressing. Sounds like not really so fulfilling, but all these other things are just aspects and just parts of that. Eating, doing recreational things, doing what you actually enjoy, having hobbies. These things obviously have to deal with your character, but your overall mission while you're walking here on earth is obviously for that. Formative period for heaven. Teach your kids teach their kids, you teach other individuals, you make disciples out of all nations, and that's the overall premise and why you essentially are here. You can't let other individuals be ignorant of these facts themselves when you yourself already know. You come to a knowledge and understanding that this is it, man. There's not really anything else that you could essentially do about these things. I mean, it's like, yeah, there's food and there's other things that we obviously enjoy because these are just things that are according to our likings and to our our taste or whatever. But that has nothing to deal with what I was actually talking about. People make a tremendous deal out of it, just because this is only the formative period for heaven, and automatically all they hear is you can't have food. Forget about flavor, all of it, no seasoning, nothing, just bland. And that's essentially it. That's all your life, and this is just a formative period for heaven, and then you go to heaven, and that's it. No food, and you can't even do any of the hobbies. That's obviously not what I actually am mentioning. These two are two different topics entirely. But you obviously need that level of direction as well to know what you actually are here for, what you need to be doing here on earth, what's your overall goal, what needs to be your drive, your overall drive, and as well as working your job that you actually love working, that glorifies Jesus Christ. Or what's the point, right? There's no realistically any point for you to actually get a job if it doesn't glorify Christ. You're gonna be selling sins and doing other things like that. So obviously you have to that just shed so much light for you to actually be able to discern whether your job is biblically or scripturally aligned, or is it just easy money, which obviously is cursed, is just the devil's money because you're selling sin. It's a pretty simple concept to understand. It's like selling drugs. You don't sell drugs because it's illegal, it's a sin. And you don't, sell cigarettes because it's a sin as well to smoke them. So why would you sell them to somebody else? Or, other things like that, right? That realistically are able to open your eyes. But, so yeah, the inheritance part of your lives as well, which you actually have inherited, the assets and tools to actually be able to make this a lot more easier instead of, working a lot harder, instead of working a lot smarter. Again, these are just assets. They're not, any types of replacements or substitutions for any of those things themselves. So that's just something that you realistically need to be able to discern, that, deliverance is not a substitution for you actually picking up your Bible and reading it. And you reading your Bible or listening to some sermons is not, a substitution for deliverance. So you're obviously going to have to cast out some devils. You're obviously going to have to heal yourselves what needs to be. And yeah, this is obviously one of the most, was going to shed a lot of light. It's that, casting out devils is not even a substitution for healings. Some of these deliverances you genuinely and seriously need to heal yourselves for, or you're never going to receive those deliverances. And some of these healings, obviously you need to be able to cast out these devils and be able to break those curses and generational curses, ancestral sins, and all these things themselves for you to actually be able to receive that level of healing. But you just want to act them, you just want to play them because you want the deliverance that you actually need, is just not going to happen. You already know the truth. You already know that you need to put these things to practice, but you're scared, or so many other different things are obviously holding you back and preventing you from really being able to, live this suffrage-free life according to your body, But, so yeah, it's pretty simple. It's pretty basic to be able to understand. This suffrage-free life is only meant for your overall, body-wise. You're still going to go through a lot of suffrages, through a lot of, trials and temptations, but these things obviously don't have to affect your body. They don't have to affect your family members. These illnesses don't have to actually fall on your, grandparents or any of these types of things. So yeah, right, that was a lot. But the inheritance side of things and what you actually have inherited, the power, the Holy Ghost, and what you essentially are from now on. So once you actually really take, deliverance, and you really accept that as truth, and you actually take, the deliverance from the lake of fire through the atonement of Jesus Christ is what I meant. And you actually, believe these things themselves. Now it's obviously, what's a good analogy for this, or a good example? So basically, once you actually get hired for a place, they give you, you go in there, you're like, okay, I'm hired, now I'm here. And then they obviously give you a whole set of tools. They give you glasses, gloves, work gloves, a vest, and, a lunch in some places. And they do so many other different things like that. And this is obviously the same old thing. Once you actually take the atonement, these are, this is the form that it actually takes, what you actually have inherited, the angels, the power, the authority, the spirit, the peace, I guess. I mean, to put it in those types of terms, but more or less it's just you need deliverance because you're not experiencing peace. And these things are obviously automatically just a means to actually be able to help you while you continue working in the kingdom of light, right? And so, the angels help you out, and they help you get your messages that you actually need to get. The Holy Ghost helps you out when you actually are being tempted, and obviously it's actually able to help you out to resist the temptations that come inside of your life, and the temptations of you actually not wanting to read the scriptures. That way you actually do study yourselves approved. This is what the Holy Ghost obviously helps us in. He helps us when these temptations actually end up coming inside of our lives, for us to actually be able to, remain holy, preserved, righteous, and we don't let any of those, former things afflict us. Obviously, I don't want to say like that we were so afflicted, like we were so, damned. And so more or less, we just prefer to actually do other things. Now that we actually have our priorities, we have different priorities for us to actually be able to choose what realistically matters more to our soul and what we actually need. That's essentially it. We realistically don't go back to the same old types of tactics, and to just put it in terms of afflictions, and like, oh, we were so afflicted we couldn't even pick up the Bibles. As like, man, as like, we were realistically really, uh, really shady to God, and we were just like, man, we'd much rather prefer to do these types of things instead of picking up a Bible. And so that's just the only reason why I actually said it like that, because I mean, it just sounds annoying in all honesty for people to just continue to just shifting the blame on something else, when in reality it all has to deal on your own responsibility and accountability. The reasons why you're struggling, same as that concept, but it's just a different form, sadly. You want to shift the blame to the flesh. That's the reasons of the flesh. Oh, it's the devil. It's because of the devil that I'm like this. In reality, it's not even like that. These seriously have to deal with your own responsibility and accountabilities. Nobody put a gun to your head and told you to commit those sins. That you saw it like that is just obviously a clue to be able to recognize that, you need deliverance in that region and in that area. Or maybe you actually feel presences coming around you when you're going to sleep and you have sleep paralysis, or when you feel these temptations coming inside of your life, and all of a sudden you feel overwhelmed. Obviously, these things themselves have to deal deliverance. So, but you still have to take the first step in you actually, what is that called? Is the first step of you actually receiving help is admitting you have a problem. You cannot receive any help, or you cannot be taught, if you don't actually admit there's a real problem there. And sadly, many Christians don't actually view it like that, and they just want to shift the blame completely. I'm just struggling. The Lord knows my heart, and they just give so many types of excuses as to why they just continue dealing with the same old sins over and over again. In reality, they just don't have the reverence and the fear to actually abstain from those types of things, and to just stop immediately from them actually being able to just live these holy and sin-free lives. But sadly, uh they don't see it like that, right? Many individuals don't see it like that. That's why they continue struggling. That's why they continue doing this. They don't even bother fasting. They're just like, well, as long as the Lord actually sees me working through it, and he actually sees me working towards his goal of finally being free, then everything is going to be fine. I mean, the real truth is that he's actually trying to destroy you at that point, because you're not actually able to equate that if you actually were to die that day, that when you actually are, struggling with those types of sins, you would go to hell. You're betting way too much on Christ's, grace and mercy, when in reality that grace and mercy has left you. The grace and mercy, the real grace and mercy that is in your life, is preserving you from actually going to hell, and preserving you from actually dying. That's real grace and that's real mercy, not you continuing to use it as a crutch while you continue struggling. You're obviously using the God's real grace as a license to sin, and you just continue doing those types of things, and not realistically really recognizing what the consequences for your actions are going to be if you actually die this very day, or you die tomorrow, or whenever you actually end up dying, right? And I mean, that's essentially it. It was clear, right? You're actually able to understand those types of things. I'm not just saying it just to actually be able to say these things, but you know, real grace is you obviously not going to hell. The grace that you're obviously attempting to define as grace is just you actually using it as a crutch and as a license to sin. You're not realistically using it for what you need to be using it for. And that's to ensure fast. So abstain from these things that obviously are going to cause you to stumble, until you actually are able to build that sort of, stamina or momentum up, when you actually, get tempted with those types of temptations again. But in all honesty, you just need deliverance, right? You need to be able to break free from what has ensnared you, and what has trapped your mind to not be able to process things like a normal human being. All that other stuff, sexual immorality, lasciviousness, fornication, adultery, and other things that have to deal with that. That is not how obviously the normal human mind operates, and I don't get automatically tempted to actually do whatever with every single girl that I come into contact with. More or less the same reaction ends up coming. It's like, wow, she's really pretty, and it's like, yeah, and it's like, well, what's up, and realistically, it's not even anything like those types of things. Like, it's like, oh yeah, I realistically know that I have someone, I have a soulmate, right? That I realistically can't be just going with every single person. It's like, well, yes, it's like funny to, just talk about certain things and certain aspects. Obviously, none of that is going to take away anything from, obviously, it's not going to influence you to fall for temptations or fall into sin or to stumble. Or when a girl is over there twerking on Instagram, obviously, plenty of guys see those types of videos. Is that some type of wifey material that you actually want from someone that plenty of guys have seen the same old vid? Obviously not. You don't know how soul ties form. You don't know if soul ties form just because these guys automatically just begin, touching themselves, and that's how the soul tie forms with them. And all these different guys and all these plenty of guys have this many soul, these types of soul ties with the same girl, and obviously these things are a lot more dangerous because the transferring of spirits obviously ends up making a mess out of the situation, as well as overall judgments for their sins and their crutches. And so realistically, you're not at that level, right, to know how fast these soul ties can form or any of those types of things themselves, which is obviously just another means for you to actually be more cautious about the things that you put before your eyes, and to ensure that you're not just falling for the same old tricks of the devil, to be able to to overlook it and to just shrug it off to the point where you obviously are not phased by it. You just shrug those things off. I know I mentioned in the past how some of these temptations obviously hit you like a rabid dog, right? But now to the point, it should be to this point, these things should be like, swatting a mosquito or swatting a fly away from your face. You're not really as phased by it as you used to be phased by it, which is the overall point of deliverance. It's just removing the whole, element of just this impossible feat to be able to overcome, and this obstacle that is just can't be overcome by you. And that would be the whole premise of it. That's the real issue that is actually happening. It's just this sin has just made itself to be this enormous giant that nobody can pass through and nobody can get through. And that's just in short the type of suffrage that you actually are enduring and going through. But while you're continuing to live through that same, philosophy and that mind set, you're going to go into hell. That's a sin. That's sort of like idolatry. But the fact that it's a sin in itself that you're actually struggling with is is the main tactic of the devil that he's using to be able to cause you and to hold you, and that you actually remain struggling with these sins, and that you don't take your eyes off from that thing, from that sin, and you put your eyes back on Christ, and you recognize that nothing is bigger than him. So I don't want to talk about these things, how to be able to break these curses up. You break them through the cross, because nothing is bigger than Jesus Christ himself. And because there is no curse that is bigger than Jesus Christ himself, obviously every single curse, including the curse of death, can be broken through the power of the cross. This is obviously our confidence when we actually are able to say that every curse is broken because of what Christ actually did on the cross for all of mankind and all of humanity. So that's just the deliverance side. So these generational curses, these ancestral sins, and these ancestral curses, all of these are just nothing, right, in the eyes of, in comparison to who God actually is. And so obviously it's easier to not doubt when you actually tell yourself that I'm going to break these curses through the cross. And you could obviously, be 100% solid and grounded, knowing that all of them are broken. Now it's obviously on your action and, your efforts to get rid of every single one that you need to get rid of in a strategic manner. The ones that are obviously bothering you, the curses of you actually having some sort of infirmity or some terminal illness that is affecting you, or has been affecting you. There's obviously no more. There's no real power for it to actually hold you, because not even death could hold Christ, right? I know Passover, these things themselves, it's just very simple and basic principles to understand as a Christian, but we're not actually applying them to the, your suffrages of, of ailments on your body. That makes it a whole, another task in itself. You continue just praying for the Lord on the Lord's timing to actually be able to heal you, for you to actually find a soulmate. When in reality, what have I mentioned in this video? These are just things that you actually have inherited. And these curses are just detours. In all honesty, you could drive a straight path if you would just take some action, and if you would just remove the obstacles from the road. But you want to be so lazy and so complacent and so self-satisfied to just drive around these things and completely make a u-turn and go back to your homes and not even bother actually moving the traffic cone that is just in front of you know the road. You just have to get out of the car, take out the traffic cone, and that's it. And then you just continue, driving forward and driving straight to your destination. I mean, this is the easiest road that you could possibly get to your destination, and you continue, just making this enormous deal and this enormous feat out of the sort of situations and trials that essentially come inside of everyone's life. And to you, it's just like, well, whatever, this is just how I have to deal with these problems and situations because that's how my pastor has taught me. Obviously your pastor isn't as bold as he comes off, and your pastor is very ignorant about these things themselves, especially what was actually done on the cross for us. So I feel like this individual is not realistically, qualified to actually be able to preach a good sermon. He could just tell you pretty basic stuff, like I was mentioning earlier about grace and mercy, but automatically, if he's not telling you about this being the formative period for heaven and giving you some overall and general direction for your life or what Christ actually wants you to do in this life to actually perfect your eternal character, and that you actually become more Christ-like and you focus on all of Christ's virtues and his characters and his quality traits and these types of things, obviously you could just dismiss that pastor. You're not going to get fed as often as you think. You're going to be very complacent with crumbs and the little scraps of off the plate, and in reality that's not real Christianity whatsoever. The first is last and the last is first, and so many other different things. In all honesty, that was actually able to show you that the individual that is the highest among you has to be your servant. That's how Christ actually taught us. The Pope, that is not a good example whatsoever. He's not even abiding by Christ's commandments whatsoever. If he's supposed to be the greatest among us, he obviously has to be serving us and being able to, not living in this super lavish house with nothing but, billions of dollars. And, meanwhile, there's poverty, there's world hunger. And the most thing that is actually focused about is remaining and staying on this little, the seat of the Pope. And obviously, what does that even say about it? It makes Christians and Catholics look like complete hypocrites to the point that it's like, well, not even your leader, this guy is supposed to be your leader, was actually able to, do something about this poverty. He just goes over there, visits, he kisses the children, and then he heads right back to the Vatican. And what kind of, role model or example is that for the unbelievers? Obviously, not a very good one. It's from a strategic standpoint, automatically the devil is using this man as a obviously a man of sin, because this individual is not saved. He's using this man to be able to twist Christ's image and God's image, and to twist the gospel entirely to obviously not get the individual saved that are part of this, that are lost, right? The secular world and these types of individuals themselves. But the point of this video was for you to actually remain sinless, for you to actually be able to know that you can overcome if you have that that level of faith. I don't want to say faith, but still that level of knowledge, to the point that you actually are able to be taught that it is possible. If I'm able to actually do it, and to me it's just like a light switch that I could just flip it on, and I could just remain and stay with that same momentum without even being fazed or worried about what another person is going to say or do or whatever. All that I'm realistically focused on and centered on is what the other individual's best interest, being a servant of Christ, and not realistically letting all these things get in my head to affect me, my relationship with Christ, and my discipleship with Christ, which is more important than all that relationship stuff. I know you want to see Christ as your buddy or whatever, but realistically you have to work your way up there. Once you actually do obey all of Christ's commandments, then obviously you could call him your friend, but he's obviously still to be viewed as God, and I'm pretty sure he was just addressing that to the apostles because, he was still incarnate in this life. He hadn't realistically really fully ascended to heaven. He didn't go back to his glory that he actually came down from. So I'm sure they already know what his life was like when he was incarnated, but that still doesn't take away anything, or any bit of what his actual person is. But so yeah, your inheritance, what you essentially have inherited, you've inherited the ability and the capability to actually be sinless, as Christ was sinless while he was walking here on earth. The main reason why is because of a mindset thing, in all honesty, and that's the main reason why in short, you don't have this positive outlook, you don't have this positive mindset that you tell yourselves that you actually are going to do what I actually have mentioned in this video. And this is just crazy. This is just a revelation that actually hit me a couple of days ago. There was a period in my time where I actually was praying to Christ to be sinless, and I was like consistent in praying the same prayer every single day. And this is just something that was inside of my heart, that I essentially wanted to reach that level, to finally be able to attain that level. I didn't want to listen to what anybody said, that nah man, this is like what no man can be sinless while they're walking here on earth. I just didn't want to believe in those sort of details, and I just firmly wanted to accept and believe firmly that it's very possible for me to actually be sinless. If Christ was able to be sinless, he was operating under the same exact guidelines as us. He wasn't all knowing. For him to actually be able to know these things, he was learning these types of the same things that we actually learn, what we actually do go to church and we do those things themselves. So obviously it's very possible for us to attain this level and to attain this feat. And after a while, finally I was actually able to recognize what realistically was causing me to be held back from really achieving my goal. For me to essentially really be sinless as Christ was sinless while he was walking here on earth, not be so fazed by these sort of temptations that come inside of my life, and just to actually be able to really address these situations according to what is actually happening. Devils are just coming inside of your life to tempt you. And then the element of pride that actually comes inside of your life when a person does something wrong to you, or does something that isn't biblically aligned, right? Automatically, everybody has to abide by these same jurisdictions, these same rules and laws, when you know them and when you actually have come to a knowledge of what these things actually are. But when they don't actually come into line with this, it's automatically better. Why are you doing this? Automatically it's like you hold them to that same exact type of judgment. But Christ, in all honesty, was doing the same. He was like that with you as well. There was a period in time where you actually began to learn these things, and it was in his infancy until the point that it's obviously at now. And obviously I'm sure he was looking at you in the same exact way, and yet you still continue to do these things. Why are you doing these types of actions? And obviously he didn't do any of that. So Christ should be able to teach you how you should react to these sort of situations and these sort of scenarios that come inside of your life. Obviously these are just the easiest means for you to actually be able to really overcome your sort of situations that come inside of your life. Is just asking, how many times have I been in these situations, right? And considering yourselves before, until it actually builds up into a habit that you actually are finally able to and to automatically ask that question. Excuse me. How many times has Christ, viewed me with, doing the same exact actions of whatever just happened right now? And honestly, eventually it just gets to a point where you're just like, I don't realistically care. All I'm doing is judging righteously. And in this situation, all that is essentially telling me to do is I can't deviate away from, what is perfect and righteous judgment. I automatically have to, bless those that curse me because it's absolutely perfect. You obviously come to a knowledge in a deeper knowledge of why Christ actually ended up saying the things that he said. I mean, those were judgments in themselves. And for you to actually be a creation, right? I was going to say a creation, but I skipped it. For you to actually be creation and to be walking here on earth, you obviously are under these laws because you are creation. You're not God. You're not under any of these, judge laws. You obviously are automatically bound by all of Christ's commandments, and obviously He gives you the perfect judgments for all sorts of scenarios and situations that come inside of your life. If an enemy comes out of your path, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to love them. If somebody curses you, what are you supposed to do? What's the perfect judgment for that? You're obviously supposed to bless them and pray for them and to wish them the best. Just genuinely good works and coming from the heart. You're not obviously saying these things like, oh man, it's like, I'm blessing you verbally, but in my heart, I'm cursing you. I don't want the very worst for you. You obviously, it's the other way around. It's in your heart, you genuinely wish these individuals the best, and excuse me, and you genuinely want, the very best for these types of people, instead of you just consistently, looking at things your own way, for you to actually be able to guide yourselves, and to judge these sort of situations righteously. And you just repeatedly just fall for the same old tactics of the devil that he sure obviously uses you for another individual is downfall, or to actually cause some real pain and suffrage for another person that you unintentionally were actually trying to do. Excuse me. You obviously have these temptations came out of real life, right? That's pretty sad in itself, but because of these temptations, it doesn't define your actual person. You made a mistake. You're still a Christian at heart, and so obviously you may have done something wrong that could have affected another person's life to that extent that it caused their downfall, and you caused so much. It's just like the teaching of karma, and obviously you affected so many more lives than just the one life that you actually have affected, and you don't realistically recognize those types of things. And you, because you actually are a Christian, you know, uh, you're just like, I made a mistake, and now I can't look back, and now there's nothing that I can realistically do about these sort of situations, which is obviously something that you need to be thinking ahead towards, as well as being able to recognize that your mistakes don't define you. Your identity is still in Christ, but these are just things to avoid and things to look, and to think ahead towards. That way you're not actually, really making some enormous blunders and some huge mistakes. What happens if one time you actually end up drunk driving and you crash into another individual's car, but you're a Christian at heart, just because you decided to actually be able to celebrate and to enjoy the Passover, or whatever the case may be, right? You never intended to get that drunk, but the overall point is mistakes ended up happening, and now because of that, you're involved in a lawsuit and in a case where a person lost their life because of one night. This mistake obviously doesn't define you whatsoever, but these are just instances that you need to be thinking ahead towards, and just be putting yourselves in those types of shoes, because some of your mistakes that you actually have made in this lifetime have realistically, I know you don't want to see it like that. You're just like, what the heck? All I did was not pay for this individual's stuff. But realistically, you don't know, how much damage you could ensure do to another person just by these little actions, and these little things. So yeah, grace and peace be multiplied to you. The grace is to know what I'm saying, the peace to know that it's sent from God, and the mercy to actually be able to receive these things. And the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ and the love of the Lord Jesus Christ reign in your hearts and be with you all. So, what I just touched on was, it's pretty sad, sadly, but many individuals always just end up, making these same exact mistakes, always not thinking that it could actually happen to them, and they just continue living these sort of philosophies and these ways of thinking. Well, I'm a Christian at heart, I don't intend to hurt anyone, but if that's how it actually happens, then that's just how it's got to be. But in reality, you have every means to actually be able to prevent those sort of things from happening, and to prevent, this little cataclysmic, action, and this little domino effect action to not affect so many individuals and so many peoples. So this is just something that you obviously need to equate and recognize that, it applies to you in some way, shape, or form, and it's going to apply to you again in another way, shape, or form. So these are things that you obviously need to be, strict and disciplined in just choosing, good works, and not choosing to actually, um, and deviate yourselves from that path just because the devil is able to use those sort of reactions and actions from you. God is never going to command you to do anything wicked. He's obviously always going to tell you to do something that is good. He's not ever going to do anything else that has to deal with the kingdom of darkness or flesh. That's more obvious. He's not going to tell you to fornicate or to commit adultery with someone else's wife. He's not going to tell you to to lust after another woman, or he's not going to tell you to do anything, to drink in excess, or to drink when you shouldn't be drinking, or so many of the different things that I could just keep going on and on about. But uh, I don't want to simplify it to that point, or to just give an example for every single one of these scenarios and situations, because it realistically doesn't have to get to that point. You yourselves know yourself more than I do. I don't know your story. I don't even know your middle name. You don't even know my middle name. You don't know if Angel is my first name or my middle name, and that's just something that you need to be able to understand. But obviously, I have made a lot of mistakes in my life that I was actually able to, to teach you and to help you acknowledge, the error of your ways, and to especially acknowledge, that you don't know it all, and you are very extremely enormously ignorant, and that's just something that you need to be able to understand. Right now, if an individual was to come inside of my path and I was to actually address every single situation that comes inside of our path in that current moment, at the drop of a hat or whatever, accordingly, in all honesty, I'll be like, yeah, dude. I was like, honestly, just relax. I'm going to fill you in right now and tell you everything. There's a spiritual world happening right now, right? Devils are coming around tempting you. I already know which temptations are what temptations and what spirits are doing what spirits, just by the amount of just what I actually end up saying. Every single sentence that comes out of my mouth is obviously going to produce a reaction, either from you, a potential reaction from you, how you actually have received these things, and especially if you haven't actually study any of these things, or have bothered even asking Christ about any of what I actually have said to be true, or whatever, right? And I already know what these things actually are, so you're gonna have to really slow it down in these instances, in these moments when I actually am talking to you, and for every single sentence that I essentially say to you, because everything that I say to you is 100% true, and sent from God. Just because I already know these things, I've already discerned it to that extent, and automatically they're going to try to get you to doubt. They'll try to get you to somehow shift the weight of what I actually am trying to tell you. That way you attempt to make light of these sort of sentences and things themselves. And sadly, I realistically I'm not able to get to that point with every single individual. I'm just able to watch them when they actually are being tempted. I already know what's actually happening in real time. Every single sentence that I say is going to produce a reaction out of another person, negative or positive. More or less is always going to be negative, just because people are just like that. They're very cautious individuals. If an individual is just typically neighborly and you meet them with the same sort of energy, then obviously, that's not as much of an issue. But these are just the problems in situations that end up happening when you are trying to, rip an individual out from that way of thinking and from their old way of thinking that you obviously know is demonic and a doctrine of a devil, and it is destructive and it's going to end up destroying them. The devils are extremely frantic. This is when they actually begin panicking, and because they know that I'm actually going to tell them the truth, and they don't want you to actually know the truth. And so in that instance and in that point, they know that you rely on your emotions, right? And that they'll try to stir up your heart to get that little reaction from you. You'll feel a little emotion of anger, and because you realistically are not slow to hear and to be slow to anger, you automatically react on and act on this anger. You think that because you're angry, you're automatically justified. You don't know why you're justified. You just know that because you actually are angry, it's 100% justifiable. And this is just all the types of interactions that I always come into contact with. It is the same old types of temptations from all types of various types of people, whether they're white, black, Mexican. All of it is the same thing. If individuals are abiding by their emotions instead of just being able to be rational, sound mind, and just be able to just talk to them like two normal human beings, it's a wrap. I already know that the devils are going to be coming inside of my life to try to thwart every single thing. And here I am, that every single time they actually experience anger, I'm just casting the devil out. And these are just things that I need to be able to I should be able to tell these individuals these types of things, but because of the secular world and the secular lie, you aren't actually able to reach an individual's ear because they don't want to believe it. They're like, well, everybody has their beliefs. There's so many religions on this earth. I believe in God, and praying hands, and I do this, and I tithe, and I do so many of the different things. But these individuals are still deceived. They have an image and a general idea of who God actually is, but I already know that they don't actually know God. Had they known God, they would know the words that I say to be true. They would know that I'm not just some lunatic or some crazy guy. I'm obviously speaking of experience, right? But these are the sort of interactions that I get into on a regular basis, on a daily basis. It's just trying to talk to another individual, rationally, especially. That's, one of the main things, how I usually act and how I react to things. Just being a rational mind and being able to just, think these things through, to think ahead and, is this going to cost me my life, or is this going to, what are the consequences of my actions? Obviously, logically and thinking those types of things. But automatically, not everybody thinks like that, right? Not everybody is so ground and solid in that way of thinking for them to actually be able to interact with every single person that comes inside of their life. Sadly, these people are not qualified for the job if they're not actually able to, really interact with certain people, and to that extent they let their emotions get in the way. What do these people say? You're very unprofessional. You're not realistically really living up to our standards, and they let these individuals go. They're fired, and it is what it is. So this situation has been ongoing. A lot of individuals are not actually able to really live that philosophy out, and they're not realistically able to really be mature and grown adults about these sort of situations, which realistically that's the secular term of actually being able to react and act. In the biblical terms, you're not acting godly. In short, you're not actually applying biblical, principles to your life. You're not being very Christ-like, John. In short, is what these things are actually like. It's just, applies, it goes in so many different forms for people to actually be able to, discern it and know that, I need some help. I need this, I need that. And I'm not as good as I actually think. But so, yeah, these are the types of things that I'm sure actually end up happening. People are just very hasty. They're impulsive. They don't know any better. They've been acting like this all of their life. And so for them to actually, venture out and to actually try some of these things, and to see if it's actually true, is just uncharted waters, right? They're too afraid to actually try these things out because they're so used to the comfort that they actually have been having all of their lives, no matter how destructive and no matter how, dangerous that way of thinking could actually be. They reject my words, and because they reject my words, they obviously reject Christ as well. Don't get it twisted. Every single person in the body of Christ, or every single person that is a Christian, is operating under the same exact guidelines and strategies. Christianity is just another term for individuals to appear godly, and that's it. Most of these people that are part of the Christian church and the Christian communities are no different from the secular world, that they actually believe in God. These individuals both say the same exact things. It's like, well, yeah, I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. Well, which Jesus? It's like, yeah, well, I believe in God. Well, which God? It's the same as principle. They don't know the real Jesus and they don't know the real God. Had they actually known the real Jesus and the real God, they would obviously believe my words, but they don't. They just take it with a grain of salt, and they're just like, well, whatever. You're kind of crazy. You're really radical, and they'll throw those words out, and they'll be like, you need to tone it down a little bit. You need to just be like a normal human being like us. So obviously, I already know what's happening. The devils are puppeting their mouths to actually be able to get more individuals to think like them. That way they end up rejecting the same old message, and they never actually get the help that they need. They continue living this way out, and they never actually believe in deliverance. They continue living this way out, and they never actually believe that this is just a formative period for heaven, for eternal character, and they never bother actually putting those things to practice to bear more fruit, and to actually, be walking in the Spirit at all times, because it's going to be bearing fruit. It's actually going to be able to make them more Christ-like. And so hopefully you're able to discern at this point, that these types of individuals are both one and the same, right? The Christian who claims to know Jesus, and the secular individual who claims to believe in God, right? So it's the same exact principle, the same exact premise, but in a different form. And both of these individuals are both blind. Sadly, many individuals, very rarely have eyes to see for them to actually be able to discern and know. And then individuals that actually do begin walking in the truth, they get lazy, right? And they don't even bother actually really studying themselves approved, studying historical context, or doing other things like that, or even studying from the Jewish people, how they actually react, and being able to live up to those examples. Instead, they want to define it for themselves, what is, Christ's standard and what is holiness. And they're going to perish in their filth and in their abominations that God himself does not want a single person to be abiding in. He does not want you at all setting up your standards for anything. He obviously wants you to continue living up to his standards. And if you're not living up to his standards, to be seeking that sort of help to ensure that you actually can live up to those standards, uh, until it makes a habit out of it. And then you just continue, living this perfect lifestyle out, blameless, white, unblemished, spotless, and without any worry about where you actually stand with God, with confidence, to be able to know for certain that you actually are prepared to enter the throne room of God. I'm gonna, just say this. Probably like 1% of the whole earth is actually prepared for the throne room of God. I'm not even including myself. I'm not even prepared for it. That's not one of the main things that I obviously focus on. What I do focus on for sure is spiritual warfare. But if you hear these messages coming from my page, and I'm telling you that I'm not even ready for the throne room of God, I mean, what does that say about you? How much do you actually study yourselves or study the throne room of God to be able to know what the atmosphere is going to be like, to be able to know what is actually going to be in that area, the amount of holiness that is going to be emanating from God himself, who is sitting on his throne? I mean, these are things that you're not realistically prepared for. Not that you should feel like unworthy. I mean, you're already in heaven. You obviously, that's something that you inherited, that belongs to you, for you to actually be able to walk into the throne room of God. But obviously you need to be able to show some wisdom. Are you really prepared to go to the throne room of God and to be able to see God in his holy face? No, obviously this is something that is very real, a very real reality for everyone. And even if you were to die today or tomorrow, there will still be, measures and precautions that you need to be taking to finally reach the throne room of God. There's obviously some sort of progression as soon as you even get to heaven, and you're not going to be able to come back to earth because your body is destroyed completely in a horrible accident. They will still have to do so many other different things for you to finally get you to reach that level and that point of being ready to, to see God and to be able to be in this throne room of God. So, prepare now and start early. There's plenty of saints, if not most of, if not all, right, of the saints who are just not prepared for the throne room of God, and they actually had to, take the right measurements and precautions in heaven. So, rise above, don't fall for the same old mistakes that your ancestors fell for. And to just, obviously they want you to learn from their mistakes. They don't want you to repeat their same mistakes. They obviously want the very best for you, because they love you. They're your family members. They're not going to make you guilty, or hold you to that guilty conscience, or that guilt that you're just this horrible person. And I'm sorry, son, that your life has to be like that, but that this is just what your life actually is. And honestly, that's just something that you need to be able to accept, that in heaven you're going to be around nothing but loving people that they have nobody to prove anything to. They have nobody to, in short, be able to to please but Jesus Christ and God himself. So obviously what is going to be their main focus, and what they're actually going to be centered on, just loving you, being completely forgiving, and overlooking that shameful past that you had here on earth. But obviously, there is shame in heaven if you didn't study yourselves approved, right? You have a flimsy garment. It's not even thick. You didn't even bother opening up your Bible or practicing any of these things, bearing fruit, being more Christ-like. None of these things were of any concern, but you actually, you were saved by virtue. You had that sincere and genuine faith in Christ, but you barely started working these things out, and then you died, and that's it. Not that you were a sinner or you had any sort of addictions. I mean, in the past it was a different time, right? It wasn't realistically accessible to be able to look at other things on the internet, to look at women. I mean, there was prostitutes and other things like that, but it was there was no medicine for those types of infirmities and, those STDs that these little hoes could have been given to those types of people. But right now is a whole nother story, right? It's totally different. There's more of a ability to actually be sucked into one of the devil's temptations, just because it's just readily available to any single person that wants uh, to watch these things. And you know so it's two different places, but you obviously need to be able to be confident that you can rise above, and you need to have that mindset that you will rise above, right? And so these are just one of the main things that individuals need to be able to understand and realistically grasp, that this is just what Christ himself wants from you. But sadly, how I was talking about my interactions on a regular basis is just being able to talk to another individual rationally and logically. That way they actually are able to know where I'm coming from, to know that I'm still wishing them the best, but you obviously still need to be on your toes with me. I'm not a normal person. I'm not a man that you need to be talking to me like these things. I'm obviously somebody that's very highly esteemed in heaven, and obviously because of that alone, I'm not going to hold anything against you, but I know when you're going to do it on purpose, right? And those are the things that I'm watching out for, and that's how I'm going to destroy your life. And that's it. So just obviously you know how to have manners. I'm just a normal person to you if you are a normal person. But if you want to be evil with me, I'll be even worse with you, and I'll be even pettier with you. So don't try it, don't test me, and that's essentially it. Forever is a long time, and whatever. But for the most part, I'm normal. You're normal. Everything's fine. Everything's good. But even if I wasn't to actually to do any of those sort of actions, to stoop down to that level, Christ would, the Father would, and the Holy Ghost would. So you have three individuals that are ready to be hasty and impulsive and to just tear you to pieces. So it's not even just on me, but obviously it's like, well, you have to do these things because it's you, and that's just that little lesson on itself. That way you're not getting overly confident in what you can and can't do. Certain things I just don't like. It's just my own likes and dislikes. Christ doesn't care. They'll be like, oh, you're actually kind of good looking. Okay, I don't really care. And so many other different things like that. It's just like, okay, let's focus on the more important things. I said, okay, anyway. And, those are just things like that, right? That people need to be understanding of. It's not a sin necessarily. You're not gonna get into trouble for certain things that you actually do, but my person and that aspect, two different topics, right? Two different things. You're able to understand those types of whatever. And yeah, I mean, wow, this is great, but this is just how I interact with people on a regular basis. It's not to say that I'm rude. I'm extremely, I'm a very polite person. I'm very understanding. I'm very knowledgeable. I know what's actually going on and happening. And, there's no reason for me to hold anything against you. If, we're actually able to, reach some sort of agreement or some sort of understanding, and other things like that. I already know. I come to a knowledge that you have your own life. You had kids, you had this, you had that. You realistically didn't have the amount of time to actually be able to study these things. And because of that, you obviously have some sort of, grace and patience from God. But obviously, if you know these things, put the pep to your step, right? You need to floor it. You can't, continue just living this, same old immature way of thinking to that extent that you don't, to that extent that you don't even bother, doing anything about the information that you actually have learned. God is very forgiving. God is very merciful. He wants the very best for you. If that's something that I genuinely practice on a regular basis, God is going to be the same exact thing. If you, just be rational and just actually be able to stop your actions that were causing him to get angry with you and causing him to be impatient with you. That's pretty simple, you could have that side of God if you just cut it out, right? You're just acting dumb, you're acting stupid, and those are some actions that need to be removed from your overall lifestyles and mentalities. And that's it. God is not obviously going to hold anything against you if you just you act right, you get right, and these sort of things themselves. But for real, I'm a really polite person. I'm very well mannered. And so many other different things, in all honesty. But none of that obviously takes away anything from my person. The types of people that come inside of my life to act petty or to do petty things, they know what they're doing. They're not little kids. They automatically know, why they're doing it. They know they're actually going to get a reaction out of me. So they obviously signed their life away, and they could go ahead and whatever ends up happening inside of their life, they're gonna be able to just look back and be like, I should have never did that, and it's going to be like I told you, and I'm just going to laugh. It's going to be exactly the same as Proverbs 1. I will laugh when your calamity comes upon you. I will mock when your fear comes. And say, well, whatever. You already knew, but you thought it was a game just because you weren't on fire. I mean, but so be cautious. You have 4 people ready to come at you and ready to get at you. So don't even try it, right? If you feel like you can't actually, submit to that, you're just rebellious, in all honesty. And Christ doesn't hold it against you. I don't hold it against you. I already know what's going on. I know that you could actually be delivered and be sane to the point that these things don't actually affect you. In the same exact manner as how you don't, spit on someone who you respect, and your terms of, this individual deserves my respect. It's the same exact situation and scenario. It is whatever. Christ understands. He already knows. He's not going to hold these things against you. And neither am I. I realistically don't care. I like to joke around and say so many different things because, it's funny. But still, don't, some things I just genuinely don't like. But, I'm just getting to that sort of topic. So because I'm talking about me, I'm just going to talk about this. How easy it actually was for me to actually be sinless, and for me to just really put the commandments of Christ to practice inside of my life, or in my life, for me to actually be able to, apply those sort of judgments and commandments to the scenarios that came across my path. In all honesty, it was really easy, Once I finally removed that element of pride, of worth, who am I to receive, that entitlement? I'm supposed to be treated fairly because I'm this great big person, I'm basically, content with my sort of life and the sort of, reality that actually is real to me, and what Christ actually reveals to me to be truth and to be real. And I know so many other different things about the human, nature and how people actually think, to the point that I know a lot of people have some sort of, traumas. I've been there, I've done that. I lived in the ghetto. People stole from me. I was the only Mexican in a whole bunch of, black kids' class. To come to the suburbs, to speak ghetto, and have everyone insult you and make fun of you just because you don't talk like them, and things like that. Obviously, make tremendous deals out of these issues when we're kids, but but this is just what ends up happening, right? I already been there. Would I prefer to have stayed in the ghetto if it meant that I actually wasn't, left out or whatever? People didn't think I was weird, obviously, but because I actually went to the suburbs and I spoke, ghetto or whatever, it's like, well, this person's kind of weird. He's an out of towner or whatever. I already know what that sort of lifestyle is actually like. To actually want to live that sort of lifestyle, that's, heavy trauma and heavy baggage that I didn't let it get to me at this age or at 20 years old is another story entirely, right? These individuals obviously they don't think like how I did. So these things obviously affected them, and because it affected them, they're not actually able to really interact with another person normally or in a healthy manner. To them, it's just like, well, to me, it's just like, well, people are always going to be people. Realistically, they've always been people. It doesn't matter if you actually are, nice and respectful to them. People are just never going to change. They experience the same things that I experienced. The only things that I could actually, be responsible for are my own actions, and that's it. These are the same exact types of mentalities that you need to be living in and abiding in. All you're responsible for is how you react to things and how you're going to react to them. If you yourself know that you're weak in that area and that you're going to lash out and get angry if somebody steals your stuff or somebody touches your things, obviously you need some places to work on, right? You need some things to actually be able to occupy your time, to actually be able to, cope with those sort of situations in a healthy manner, and you're not, just wanting to punch Bob in the face or to punch Angel in the face just because this individual said the same thing that somebody said to you when you were a kid, right? And automatically it just triggered you. Nobody says that. Nobody touches my soft spot. And obviously, hopefully by now you're actually able to discern. You're using that as a defense mechanism to not appear vulnerable, or so you never get hurt. And the same exact manner as how you got hurt that first time, and that's how you are actually able to really cope with those certain situations in that manner. It doesn't make you any less manly for you to actually be able to let go of these situations. It makes you spiritually weak, and it doesn't make you any more manly for you to actually be able to apply these sort of situations, apply these sort of teachings to those situations. Obviously you could always be better, and you need to be continuing to move forward, to strive for a more excellent way, instead of you just repeatedly, well, I'm just stuck here, I'm perfect, I've been doing this all of my life and I don't realistically care. Cut it out. You obviously are going to still be practicing that virtue out in heaven because of the eternal progression to be in the Father's image and in His likeness. He's infinitely times perfect, and that's a lot of perfect, right? What level of perfect are you at? Even in certain areas that you actually have, quote unquote, mastered, you haven't even reached the level of perfection that Christ or God has. So there's an eternal progression on your end and on your part to be made in the same exact image as how Christ has made you, and that He actually has. And I mean, that's essentially it. You have no real direction. You have no real knowledge of what you actually have before you, the types of goals that you need to be meeting and achieving before you end up going to heaven. And when you finally do get to heaven, you have all of eternity to be in the same exact manner and likeness as the Father Himself. So you need to begin, and you need to start doing these things now, and just being able to let go and detach yourselves from the same old, destructive habits and reckless behaviors. That way you, in short, begin to be exactly like God's image and person. But, you're very ignorant, in all honesty, and you're going to remain ignorant for a majority of, your time and for a majority of your eternity, about, what real holiness is, what real perfection is, and what God's real image actually is. I mean, you're going to be copying and imitating, God's certain qualities and traits, but you're realistically not going to get to that point ever. There is an eternal progression, and eternity obviously implies forever. You're going to continue just moving towards the same exact goal. So it's just, mind-blowing for you to actually be able to grasp how perfect God actually is, and the types of, goals that you need to be able to achieve while you're walking here on earth for you. And this is only going to be done through your own efforts and diligence. If you're not realistically being diligent or, consistent with these sort of efforts or applications, or making good use of your time, I mean, what's realistically the point? You just rather prefer to do other things instead of, being more Christ-like, applying Christ's commandments to these sort of situations, and doing the things that you obviously prefer to do. What would you much rather be? I know you want those sort of, goals to be achieved, but you have no real drive, right? You have no real urge to reach those sort of, those sort of urges. And, definitely when I actually did pray that, now I'm actually able to see and discern that God did answer my prayer in that form, for me to actually be able to be delivered in these areas of my life and my mind that were preventing me and holding me back from actually being able to apply Christ's commandments to these sort of situations and scenarios. So it will obviously put me in situations where, it's like, oh, this is truly unforgivable. You just completely overlooked them, and you overlooked that, and it's like, how do you do that? How do you live? I have to ask my pastor, what do I do in these situations? Oh yeah, I asked him. He told me to cut them off. And it's like obviously people are not realistically able to discern, the spirit from the flesh. What is more um, beneficial to your spirit, to be overlooking or to just cut them off? Well, some people are just toxic. You're going to continue justifying these things themselves, but it's never going to produce any growth or maturity on your end, on your part. If you just want to continue, doing those sort of things, you realistically have a lot to actually grow in. You need a lot more maturity on your end for you to actually finally be able to not be so hurt by these sort of situations that come inside of your life that happen to everybody, and especially that come from people that you care about and people that you would never have expected them to actually treat you in those manners. So that's able to teach you that you're very immature and you lack a lot of maturity, in all honesty. And I'm not saying this out of, wagging my finger at you like, how could you, you stupid human? How could you act like that? I'm sinless and I'm perfect and this and that. Obviously, I'm saying that because of the overall mindset. If you really have a desire, to actually be able to be mature about the sort of situations, or just to be able to cope with it in a healthy manner to the point that those, ailments and situations don't affect you. I'm trying to tell you that you essentially can reach that point, but you have to be willing to accept that, it's not going to, change anything about these sort of situations, for except you actually finally being able to not be so affected by it. It's going to produce some real maturity for you to actually be able to let life go and to just be able to admit that, these certain actions, these certain acts are just life itself. I've been there. I already know to be treated, so badly and so horrible by people that I would have never expected it to come from. But there's not realistically anything that you could really do, And in my own, logic, in my own mindset, it just made sense for me to never talk to my parents. But Christ would have obviously forced me. I know I'm saying obviously a lot, but Christ would force me in situations that I would have to be dependent on them. So I had no real choice but to actually continue with, affiliating myself with them. And to you, it's convenient. You have a job, you had this, you had that. I didn't have any of those things. I didn't have a car. My friend crashed it, and so many other different things, and so it forced me to actually, go back to my mom's house and go back to actually be able to really cope with those certain situations and really deal with toxic situations that I realistically didn't want to deal with. And I would just be dealing with it and I would just be like, man, Christ, I just can't do it. I'm this person, I'm that person. And, I can't believe she would do that to me. And then Christ would just be like, well, she's your mom. And then during the times, those things, I would just not even be able to just shrug away. Like, she's my mom. She's like, I'll still be angry with my arms crossed. Like, man, how could she do this to me? It's like, I guess I'll let it go or whatever. And then she's like, oh, she's doing it again. And she's your mom. This is when I was like 26 or 27. But not up until recently, I was finally able to, really let it go. I was actually able to finally be like, what, yeah, she's my mom. I realistically have no reason for me. How much did she really deal with me? She bonded me out of jail. She did so many other different things. She tried looking for me when I was in high school and I was a teenager, and all I realistically did was stress her out. So, and then for me to just get mad at those little inconveniences because I was finally doing something better for me and I thought she would notice, was just completely irrational. It didn't even make sense, or it didn't even hold any water realistically. It's like, man, all the stuff that I essentially, it didn't weigh out in the balance. And I was finally, this was up until recently, though, when I really reflected on my, behavior in these videos. And basically I was just like, wow, I really made a lot of mistakes. And during the time, the devils just hyped it up to that extent that it just sounded so believable and it sounded so plausible for me to actually act in that manner, and for me to actually be able to, really be that sort of, type of mentality, for me to not be able to be so, affected by it, and to just let those things just affect me day in and day out. And as sadly, this just how individuals just think. The devil just comes out of their lives to just hype it up, to just make an enormous deal out of those sort of situations. and they continue, believing all of the hype, and they're just like, yeah, you're right, I have to cut this individual off because, they're being toxic, and, this is just what everybody does. But in reality, if you really want to grow and you really want to mature, you're gonna have to deal with those certain situations. You're gonna have to find a way to cope in a healthy manner for those certain situations, or you're never going to grow out of it. In all honesty, you're gonna continue just going, handling the situations, getting mad, going to your mom's house. The same old situation ends up happening, and the same old coping mechanism ends up coming up. And then you just continue acting it out, and none of you ever mend, or ever reconcile that relationship that you two actually ended up destroying, just because of your lack of maturity and your lack of growth. So hopefully you're actually able to discern, this is just not just one guy just rambling off talking about a whole lot of other things. Obviously Christ did show me, the real fruits out of you actually putting up with, certain situations that realistically were not, you know right. Nobody's saying that how they treat you is right, or nobody's saying that what they actually are doing is correct, or they're not in the wrong. What I'm saying is that if you continue to fight fire with fire, you're gonna get burned. And this is just what you need to just ensure. The only way for you to conquer evil is through good, and for you to realistically really amend and really reconcile that sort of relationship with your parents, or with whoever, your family members, your sisters, your brothers, your cousins, is to make yourselves uncomfortable, for you to actually be able to finally grow, and to just gain some sort of maturity to, and maybe it really does help, right? It realistically does help if you just think that, man, this conversation is probably going to end, in an argument, and just to be able to prepare for those types of scenarios, to the point where you actually are not, you know, expecting this super, healed relationship with your mom, with your parents, with your dad, whoever, and to just actually be able to prepare, to be able to talk to them, reason with them. If they don't want to actually hear your reasoning, okay, understand where they're coming from. They dealt with you all of your life. Some of these things are still fresh inside of their mind because of your parents, and they're your loved ones. How many more relationships would actually be finally healed through communication, right? Through them finally communicating what the real issue was and what they actually have been experiencing all of their life. Most, if not all of these, relationships will finally be healed. They said, well, yes, it was a general misunderstanding on your end concerning why I actually did the things that I did. It did not, give any excuse for, blah, 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 for you to treat me this manner, and so many other different things. And I already know that's going to go a whole nother direction. You think that you're actually going to be able to finally reach their ears, but some people just genuinely don't want to hear them. Sometimes you're just going to have to say, okay, you're right. You're my mom. You're my dad. I don't want to get to that point. I made a lot of mistakes, but I am trying, or whatever else the case may be, right? Whatever applies to your certain situations. For your parents and your mom and your dad, you're just gonna have to say, fine, okay, I may be 28 years old, but it's still not respectful for me to actually talk to my parents in that manner. You may talk to me in a certain way because you're my mom, you're my dad, and these things. But well, so now I'm gonna get to the more spiritual side of why these things actually are the way that they are. Deliverance. These are, wounds that have never been healed, have never been treated. How many wounds do you just, let go and treat it? You have kids, you automatically tend to those wounds right away. These are pretty simple, concepts to understand, but you don't really apply them to the spiritual, right? To your soul. You just let these wounds continue going off unhealed, and then you go off into the world, and you're like, why am I always reacting to this situation in the same exact manner? How come I'm not actually able to reason with anyone? Why am I alone? And it's like, oh, it's because you're still treating individuals off the premise of, you're treating individuals off the premise of, of this and that. So while yes, these individuals do have a lack of self-control on their part, or on their end, it realistically has, it's, these issues are a lot more, serious, and a lot more severe than you actually think. It's just not going to go away just by you actually admitting that it's self-control. These are not quick fixes. You really need to be able to be committed to that, to that discipline and that strictness of you finally being able to, and that self-control, for it to actually, build into a healthy habit. Everybody's in this, go, 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 now, now, now sort of way of thinking while they're walking here on earth. But these things are just not quick fixes. There's no shortcuts. It's like, well, yes, these actually appeal to your logic and your reasoning, but this is only the means for you to actually finally be able to step up and get up from the ground, and walk forward into you actually healing yourself, and you actually growing and maturing. This is not at all going to be this enormous process. I mean, how long did it take for me to actually be able to admit that they put up with me for such a long time, and I'm over here expecting some results that were just unrealistic. And I was 13 all the way up until 25 or 26. They put up with me all of my life, and during the time where I was like 26 or 27, when I was finally amending my ways, just because I actually, was finally doing something better for me, I expected them to just stop treating me, and the devil just hyped it up to this extent, to this enormous way of thinking, which obviously is you, to the point that I didn't even, it just made sense to me, and it's like, man, you're right, devil, you're right. My mom should not be treating me like this. So hopefully you're able to understand that you're being manipulated in those situations by devils to actually get you to get that reaction, and then you completely destroy the relationship just because you say something wrong to your mom, and she completely just kicks you out, and she completely just tells you that, you know what, I don't even want to deal with you anymore, go live on the streets. And 10 years down the line, you're like, man, you're right, mom, you're right. And these sort of situations. So you realistically need to, the devils don't care about your soul. They don't care about your life. They're rooting for that to happen. And that's just something that you need to be able to understand and recognize, They want that to happen. They're waiting for that to happen. And they're expecting that to happen because you're very ignorant about it, and you don't actually know what they actually are planning and how they actually are doing it. They're betting on you choosing the wrong, because what is wrong is their playground. They're actually able to know what they could steer you just from that little iniquity, from that little internal force that is inside of your vessel that just makes sense to you. You believe the hype when you never should have believed the hype. You should have just accepted, that your parents were right. What do you know? They put up with you for a majority of your life, and here you are getting mad because you're finally doing something better for, something good for yourself. It doesn't even make sense, I'm telling you my problems, how I went through these things, and you're just shaking your head like, man, I can't believe you actually fell for it, and yet you're going through the same exact thing. I was like, man, I can't believe you fell for it. So like, well, it's like, yeah, man, these sort of things are just like that, eventually, to us, it feels like the biggest thing on the earth, because, it's our first time actually dealing with these certain situations. We don't realistically know how to be able to cope with them in a healthy manner yet. All we know is what we actually have in our experiences. Our parents are backstabbing us, betraying us. You're like, man, how could you act like this? You've been so nice to me all of my life. You've dealt with me, I'm finally doing something good for me, and now you decide to actually treat me, wrong. That's like, well, you kind of deserve it, buddy. All your life, you've actually been acting, rebellious and doing this. Nah, man, I don't want to hear it. I'm finally doing something better for me. So obviously they believe the hype. There's so many of the different things. But the deliverance side of it, this is just what you actually have inherited. You have every means to actually be able to break free from those mindsets and from those states of mind that are preventing you from really being able to be rational and logical about these situations, because that's essentially what you aren't. You're not rational about it. You aren't actually able to reason and be like, you know what, yeah, they have dealt with me most of my life, and I'm barely, doing something good for myself. Let me just be patient with my family members. I really think this one through to actually be able to get to the point where, I'm finally able to deal with these sort of situations in a healthy manner, So let me just give it some time. Let me just continue doing this and practicing Christianity, practicing good works and, the commandments of Christ, and see where it takes me. You're going to fall into sin, in all honesty, just because you didn't obey Christ's commandments. In those situations, you need to pray for them. They're your family members. You need to stop, what's the word? You need to stop cursing them in your heart. You need to be able to let go and be forgiving and overlooking of these certain situations. And just because you absolutely need it, it's vital, it's necessary, and it's very un-Christ-like. You're not practicing very Christian principles or foundations, so you definitely need to cut it out right away. You're gonna die. Go into the lake of fire. It's gonna stem into so many of different problems: bitterness, unforgiveness, resentment, grudges, and your entire spiritual walk is going to stop, and you're gonna go straight into the lake of fire. You're not even gonna bother growing anymore. Christ isn't gonna bother using you anymore, and now He can't even use your testimony for a single thing. You're going to continue preaching about grace and mercy and God's love because you actually retain those sort of things. But that's just general knowledge. You haven't realistically learned anything new since. So that applies to you, that applies to me. And yeah. So like I was mentioning, the overall, mindset. In my mind, these things just seemed like it was just an enormous deal, and in reality, it really wasn't. These devils had just convinced me to the point where it just made sense to me. I have every reason to be angry, when in reality, it didn't even weigh out in the balance, in all honesty. And for me to be able to look back now that Christ actually has matured me, that I actually am finally able to not be so impulsive and hasty in these certain situations. I'm actually able to finally think rationally and in my right mind. I was like, yeah, I was totally in the wrong. I should have just shut up and not even have bothered even saying anything, or even, feeding into the lies or the garbage that I actually was listening to. And that time I had a general idea of what was actually happening, that devils were coming to manipulate me, but definitely nothing remotely close to what I actually know now. To the extent that I know now, I know that everybody's being manipulated, and the easiest means to be able to tell that is all the wicked works and all the evil works that are going around you and in your life. They're being tempted. These things just don't happen out of nowhere, out of the blue. These devils come inside of these people's lives to be able to tempt them and to be able to harass them and to be able to come inside of your life and to destroy your life and to ruin you, to try to get you. That's why the devils are coming in it. Christ is obviously using this situation, or He's letting it happen just because, you can just practice Christian principles and whatever. You're a Christian either way. It doesn't realistically make sense for you not to practice them. But you take it the wrong way. You're like, man, why didn't God actually prevent any of these things from happening? It's more or less, it's just like He let it happen because you're a Christian and you need to apply these Christian principles. But these people were being tempted. Can you be tempted in that area or in that region of your life to be petty? No. Obviously, no. You hold yourselves very firm and grounded in that mentality and in that way of thinking that you're a Christian. It's not very Christ-like to be petty or maybe even cursing. Do you practice that on a regular basis? Absolutely not. You don't even practice that even when you get mad. So hopefully you're actually able to discern those sort of things. These people are not, they don't have anything. They don't have any sort of moral integrities or anything like that. It's just overall, in general, don't be a scumbag and things like that. But they curse, they act petty. They do these things because they don't answer to any witness. So they're actually able to be tempted in their life where you aren't able to be tempted. You aren't able to, get into fornication or adultery because you're a Christian. These individuals don't think like that. They obviously are actually able to be reached because they're not Christians. So hopefully that's, the level of awareness and understanding that you just need to have when you're walking out in the earth, and being able to really understand the depth of what is happening around you, why people curse, why people just make fun of other individuals, and why you obviously are struggling with certain sins. You just don't have that level of fear, the same exact level of fear that these people don't have. That's why they continue cursing. That's why they continue doing all these sort of things, and that's why you continue struggling with sins. These people won't even bother saying that they're struggling with them cursing, even when they actually want to stop. they'll just, come up with something else like, man, I don't realistically care, or man, this, or man, that, right? But you get into this legalistic way of thinking that because you're a Christian, oh, it's the devil, oh, it's the flesh, oh, I'm struggling. And, you got it all wrong. You got your whole outlook totally and completely all wrong. You need to get that way of thinking out of your head because it's holding you and it's the reason why you continue struggling. And that's the truth. And that's the fact of the matter. So, yeah. So basically, after praying, in those certain prayers, I wish to be sinless. I pray to be sinless. I finally got it answered in the form that it got answered. And I was finally able to, really get inside of this little IGTV thing on my, excuse me, to actually be able to, talk to people online and to tell them how to actually be forgiving. That's not one of the main things I ever struggled with in my life. I already had come to overall, knowledge that there's no real power in being unforgiving or telling someone I don't forgive you. I mean, I realistically never cared. I would be like, okay, have a good day, sir. You'll get over it. See you tomorrow. I'm never gonna forgive you. I never understood the power that these individuals felt from saying those sort of statements, and obviously I feel very bad. I feel very bad in all honesty when people now I do when they tell me those sort of things because it's like, man, you have no idea how destructive and how damaging that's going to be in your life when it realistically has no power, and you just continue telling other individuals those sort of things to people that realistically don't care at all, and they want that sort of reaction from you. And you want this apology from someone that's not even sorry, and that's just not gonna happen. They'll act like they're sorry just to actually get your hopes up, and here you go on this emotional roller coaster, and you're just like, oh my goodness, why can't you see that you're hurting me? Nobody cares in all honesty, so you need to do this for you. You need to be able to be forgiving and be rational about what unforgiving and unforgiveness actually is. There's no real power to it. There's nothing, it's just empty words. And even in the spiritual, holding another person to that unforgiveness, you just have them captive in your heart, and this individual is completely unknowing to that, and you realistically don't recognize the type of damage that you actually are doing to yourself or to another person's, soul. Cast it out, deliver yourselves, break those curses up. I'm betting it was some sort of legality or some sort of generational curse has been passed on through your family, and then just made your whole family member so susceptible to that sort of suffrages and that sort of situation specifically, until it finally gets to you, and then you just fall for the same old tactics and the tricks of the devil, and the same old patterns from your family tree. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna break that curse up, as well as being able to be reasonable and to be able to be not so hasty and impulsive on your emotions, because that's also another issue. You have no real sense of peace, and no real sense of groundness and holiness, for you to actually be able to not react to them. You don't realistically know what actually is happening. You don't know that the devil is coming inside of your life, just stirring your heart up and messing with you. And why they're actually doing it, because they know that you're weak in that area and that you're going to take the bait. By weak, what do I mean? You're going to fall for those temptations, and they know that, and they use that against you, and you don't realistically realize those types of things, and you just continue letting them manipulate you and puppeteer you, and thinking that there's not going to be any real consequences for your actions or any single thing that you actually do, because I've had this good run, or nothing's happened to me yet, or everybody is able to let these things go to an extent. I'm never going to see this individual again, and that's it, and that's the situation. I don't get it. I personally don't understand why an individual could be unforgiving. Uh, Me, it's like, well, there's no real power to it. What am I gonna feel? Nothing. I don't feel any of your emotions. I don't feel any of those things, and neither do I care. It's like I've been wanting the very best for you, but you obviously believe that just like I mentioned in this video, you automatically feel like I want to have this a little worse for you. When even if you actually end up, you know, repenting, I'm still gonna wish the best for you, 100%. Not for everyone, but for the most part, everyone, yeah. But unforgiveness, grudges, resentment, and these other things themselves have no real power. You're just damaging your own peace and your own mind. You can't even let these things go. When's the last day you ever had where that certain situation never popped up in your head? It's probably been a long time, man. And from the time the last time it actually happened, probably when it first happened, right? Up until now, you've just been thinking about it, and that's pretty sad. I don't even want to let some sort of, you know, event like that take its place in my life, especially now when I actually have so much, fun times and so many other different things. I can't live like that, in all honesty. It ruins all food and the enjoyment of food, the pleasure that comes from it. Man, this is a really good meal. Oh, hell. Okay, I remember that. Nah, man. I don't even want this food anymore. Repeatedly keep thinking while you're trying to enjoy your food, and it's like, oh my goodness. It's like, yeah, man, you don't want to live like that, in all honesty. And I'm sorry that you actually, it got to that point. But obviously, I need to be thinking ahead also to ensure that I don't ever get to that point either. Amen. So yeah, I'm gonna slowly go through what he wants to say. To be driven to be sinless. This is just gonna be one of your little practices and all that. I didn't see that you really need to get better inside of your head to, really form into a healthy habit to be praying every single time that you pray. And it's just to pray to be sinless. You never know what kind of results you're gonna see just by praying these things. You really have the desire. You don't know how Christ is gonna end up surprising you in these certain situations. So you're gonna have to just be committed to praying those certain prayers and be committed to actually be and able to be sinless. Or what's the point, right? What if he actually ends up, answering your prayer, but he wants you to get into the deliverance ministry, or he actually wants you to pray for more than 3 hours, or he actually wants you to read the Bible for more than an hour, and to watch this video more than one time, and other things that you realistically don't want to make time for. It just shows what your heart is after. You can't fool God. I mean, you want to be sinless, but you don't actually want to do any of the works that come with it. I was praying for an hour every single day. Then it went up to 2 hours every single day. I was reading the scriptures again and again, reading the prophets and reading those certain things while I was actually praying for, that. Not realistically being able to know that I was going to get delivered, or I was ever going to reach the point that I'm at right now. And now even looking back, for me to be able to, see how earnest I was, and you know, how humble and grounded I was and just in those sort of, actions, and to the point that I was actually able to finally be delivered from my overall mindset and how I thought. And that's why, in short, it was holding me back. I wasn't able to really judge those situations righteously. I mean, it's just mind blowing, in all honesty. I would have never thought that, these devils were really making those sort of situations an enormous deal. And to you now, it just sounds like, man, I was like, what? You never thought that? And it's like, nah. It's like during that situation, I didn't even know half of what I actually know now. I was just reading the prophets, and I'm just like, wow, these things. And now I'm finally able to, let go of that certain way of thinking, and I could turn that on like a light switch, that way of thinking on like a light switch, and just continue living it out to be perfect, and apply all the righteous judgments to where they need to be applied to the point that obviously I knew that I was not able to deviate myself from any of the paths uh, that Christ commanded us to not deviate ourselves from. He obviously gave us that path through his commandments. And it's like, nah, it's not right if I don't actually, bless those that curse me, or I was like, nah, it's not right if I don't actually, show mercy, or if I don't actually bless you, for you to receive grace, or I don't actually, deliver you, or nah, it's not right for me to actually let this devil come inside of your life to ruin your life. And it's like, yeah, I'm definitely gonna help you out. It's easy, just cast it out. You flick it off, like whatever. And yeah, and realistically, it just shows you, how God is able to reward you if you really are genuine, sincere, and not just all talk. Obviously, you continue, praying for more than an hour, for 2 hours, uh, reading the scriptures over and over again, watching sermons, engaging yourselves in spiritual warfare, and yeah, man, next thing you know, you're gonna look back and you're gonna be like, dang, actually, so wow, I've just been living this sort of lifestyle out. I can't believe he answered a while ago. And you're like, man, this is crazy. And hopefully that ends up, happening for you, because honestly, it's such a blessing, and it's so peaceful to know and to be assured that you obviously are blameless and upright, which is something that you need to understand, that Christ himself has been desirous of that from you all of your life. For you to finally reach that sort of milestone, that checkpoint in your life where you aren't so affected or fazed by any of these temptations or trials that come in your life, you're actually able to overlook these situations, these petty actions, or these ill dealings from other humans and other human beings, and you finally get to the point where, you're able to teach other individuals that there's a way out, and it's very much possible and very much real. But you need to be committed, you need to take action, and even more action than I took. I didn't play video games or anything like that. I didn't even listen to secular music. All I was centered on is just the Bible. I was too scared to listen to secular music because I was afraid there was spirits of devils in it. And but now looking back, it was just, I was in bondage to fear. How, in the Bible, in the book of Acts, how to abstain from idols. They were afraid of the idols themselves. But Paul was like, idols are nothing. You shouldn't be afraid of, the idols themselves. But if you actually are weak in that area, then for that, in that case, I won't even eat a single thing that is sacrificed to idols, so that my brother doesn't stumble. Same principle, same concept. If you're weak in that area, but it's nothing. It's just music. That you listen to music with profanity, yeah, I would advise you never to. In all honesty, because it has nothing, and it's just lame. In all honesty, to listen to that sort of music, or to just listen to someone actually curse, it's just like really, you can't really think of it. You can't extend your vocabulary a little bit to actually be able to replace those certain words that you don't have any sort of anything in. Well, let me curse, right? It's so predictable. It was sad. So yeah, your eternal character. God rewards the diligent. That's for sure. I didn't even think it was gonna reward me for a single thing. I thought it was just gonna be one of those sort of prayers I prayed, and then like once it finally gets answered, or if it gets answered, I'll just be like, okay, no, I'll know. But in reality, it was like that. It was just like, oh, I looked back and I was like, wow, it was my overall outlook, how I actually thought, that was preventing me from really being able to be sinless, and from really being able to apply any of Christ's commandments or teachings to my life. And yeah, if I could do it, you could do it also. But be rational. You have to do the same works that I was doing, and then even more than that, for you to actually find and see the results a lot sooner. It's not gonna happen like that, especially. Christ was the same way, he was tempted like every one of us. He didn't fall for these temptations. He had to work his way up to that point. But still, even Christ, he didn't deal with the certain situations that we deal with. Brothels, phones, it was a lot easier for you to remain sinless and things like that. And those kinds of days, not to defile your eyes, not to defile your ears, not to do this, not to do that. How? I mean, you don't listen to music. you don't watch, you don't go on the explore page on Instagram, this 2000 BC or whatever, this 0 AD. So yeah, I'm gonna ask Christ what else he wants to talk about. Definitely talk about being sinless more. That way people are encouraged, and they're committed to being able to reach those sort of levels and desires. To be able, he just wants me to talk about how it actually makes me feel when you actually plan to worship. He already knows. All you people that continue to focus on how these worship sermons make you feel instead of focusing on him. Found that funny. He already knows, that that's actually true. That once you actually do stand in his presence, you're not going to care one bit about your emotions that you feel. Automatically, you're going to be just in awe, and it's just going to stimulate so many emotions in you that you're not going to be able to help yourself because of who's standing before you. Instead of just crying, I can't believe it. Yeah. But being able to be, encouraged to know that it's possible. God rewards the diligent. I know there's a scripture. I forgot where it's at. I think it's in James. And be very, positive, and live that positive mindset and way of thinking to know that for certain that those things can actually, be fulfilled in your life. And you could actually teach more individuals, or not, or to actually be able to keep this little activity log. That way when you actually do finally get it answered, you're able to, check in and be able to see, when these things actually began changing, the types of differences that you saw when you delivered yourselves more, when you wrote more notes down, when you prayed for longer, when you fasted, and so many of different things, right? Obviously, these are just, now that everything is said and done, you finally got your prayer answered. You're just like, wow, all these, it just proved that I was committed. I really took a lot of action. I showed Christ that I was genuine and sincere about what I was praying for, instead of just, asking and, not really knowing what I'm asking, and not really caring as much as I said I cared. Actions speak louder than words, right? It's good that you have that desire, but it's even worse if you have that desire and you don't have any actions or any desire to fulfill it. But yeah, he's basically just wants me to tell you how easy it actually was. It was really easy. In all honesty, once you're not so phased and affected by the cares of the earth, and going out with your friends or even having friends, all you can realistically be focused on is pleasing Christ. That in itself just makes it 10 times easier. But because you have a social life, it's hard. I know. And then you're forced to actually be able to be pleasing to your friends, to be funny, and be like, man, you're really not gonna talk to that girl. Those types of talks, those types of situations. It's just like, I don't really care. I'm just me. I'm my own person. I don't want to fit in. I don't want to act like anybody else. I'm just me and myself, and that's it. It's like not to have anything against you as I'm your friend, but it's like whatever. I don't realistically care. I'm not even influenced by any of those sort of things. I definitely wasn't, in all honesty. I was like, okay. Like, you're not me, I'm not you. I was like, alright. I started talking about my nose or something. I was like, okay, funny. Anyway, yeah, it's not big or anything. But, so yeah, thank you for actually listening to my video. I'm gonna ask Christ what else he wants to talk about. The element of perfection, how to be perfect. Those things are so easy in all honesty. Now that I actually look back, just because I'm not affected by this, I was finally delivered from my mindset. Oh, he wants me to deliver you. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna break those curses up that are gonna hinder you and prevent you from actually, reaching its fulfillment. And the prayer being answered. Now I'm just going to cast them out by the legion, because you're going to keep being persistent and trying to act like, it didn't cast them all out just because you're going to come inside of your life to be reoccurrent. It's going to be an external force to beat you down further and further in the plank. In some cases, in some instances, you're going to have to cast them out, right? All the curses are broken. If you have some sort of, doubt or whatever, you want to make sure, break those curses up. and then cast those things out, and obviously be able to be diligent in losing virtues, blessings, moral virtues and qualities, attributes that belong to God, and qualities that belong to God, and loose those in your vessel as well, because that's the overall goal and premise of you actually being a Christian, is to continue walking and moving forward in that eternal progression, to never go backward, right? That would be degeneration and not regeneration. You are not regenerating or reconciling yourselves to Christ's image and the image that we fell from. Now you're falling back into darkness. That is not the gospel. That is not why Christ died for your sins. So yeah. So I'm still losing more graces. I don't have the word for the graces that I want to lose, but I'm just going to lose them anyway. You apply it to your life as well. I already know what that stuff is like. You continue waiting and being stuck in that way of thinking until you finally are able to articulate what you want. And you're just like, well, whatever. I'm just going to lose what I actually want, what I can't word out. And you actually get the deliverance. Yeah, I feel dumb for that, but whatever. It is what it is. At least I don't, still think like that again. We're still... So yeah, thank you for listening. Hopefully you're actually able to apply these to your life and remember them. And still, curses are going to come inside of your life that are going to cause you to not retain it, or cause you to be more focused and centered on other aspects and other parts of this video, negative or just irrelevant, or not as relevant, rather, or not as relevant to your desires. Maybe you want to be free. Maybe you finally want to get into the deliverance ministry. You don't know where to start. You don't feel as encouraged. Be encouraged to know that it's easy. And if I would have known, if I would have known how easy it was, I would have gotten into it a long time ago. And I would have not been so held back by my own ways of thinking. Again, right? Your own way of thinking is damning you and holding you back for everything and anything that is Christian-like. That is demonic activity. So break those curses up, cast those devils out, and be sincere and earnest about your desires and what you actually ask for. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Any more comments from myself? Yeah, it was pretty mind-blowing in all honesty for me to actually be able to see that I actually got what I wanted. I prayed for it. And the form that it actually took and the deliverance that it actually took was just, it was pretty good. I didn't see it coming like that. I thought I was just going to know automatically, like I'm going to be super sinless and I'm just going to reach that level of enlightenment in my life and my face is just going to begin glowing light because I finally reached that level of sinlessness. I don't know what I was thinking, but in all honesty, I look back and I'm just like, wow, I realistically was not that intelligent, and the devils were manipulating me. They were stopping me from really being able to follow Christ's commandments to certain situations that just was irrational not to. Thank you, amen. Bless you. God loves you. Christ loves you. Bless those that want to be... the easiest way to actually finally grow and mature in certain situations, or to start maturing in your life, is to bless those with this gift who you don't want to be blessed with. If you get over that hump in the road, you get over anything, right? And to really be able to look back and be like, wow, they actually are finally achieving what I blessed them with. Like, and I'm still struggling with it. That's going to stir up so much jealousy and envy. It's like, man, I should have never did it. I still don't like this person. And it could be as simple as that's the reason why you haven't realistically achieved those sort of goals and principles in your life, because you're still bitter, and it's choking out the good seeds and the good gospel in your heart. So yeah, you're being rebuked for your iniquities and your sins from Christ, because He already knows. Amen. Thank you. Love you. Bye.